move on.
Are you still screen sharing?
I was screen sharing and it kind of bumped me out. Here we are. Can you see the screen now? Can you see the agenda?
Not at the moment.
Okay, so let me get back into the screen share. Okay, can you all see the agenda now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So again, I'm going to just go over the agenda and then I'm going to get into the introductions for those who are here. If you want to introduce yourself, those who can speak. And then I want to get into the philosophy and platform of the party. And then we want to follow the rest of the scheduled agenda. So this is the agenda, and I'll scroll down a little bit. We have the welcome and the introductions. One, we have the struggle continues, where to from here during the Trump-Biden transition. We all know that Donald Trump supposedly is transitioning out of the White House as the president, and that Joe Biden and his folks are transitioning in. I put the question mark to signify basically where do we go from here at this moment, but also to signify the possibility that it may not be any transition, that what we may be witnessing in essence is a coup d'etat of some type. So the struggle continues, where to from here during the Trump-Biden transition. Number two, defining the moment and movement. We know that since the urban rebellions, since the murder of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and others, United States in particular and other places around the world have erupted in massive protests, and not just protests and pushback against police brutality and murder, but protests and pushback against systemic racism, white supremacy, and economic injustice and inequality. On top of all that, folks have been forced to deal with this pandemic. Hundreds of thousands of people here within the United States have perished. Thousands more are now ill. Businesses have been forced to go out of business. Education and the socialization of children all across the United States, especially poor children, working class, low income kids throughout urban communities and centers, has been stifled. People are not working the way that they were working before. Folks have having a lot of difficulties paying bills, so forth and so on. So defining the moment as well as the movement, we want to talk specifically about issues around police accountability and dealing with issues of police murder and brutality. So we want to give one definition to defunding the police, abolishing the police, and community control of the police. And I'm gonna use a document that actually came about from Sister Chandra. Sister Chandra had asked me to make a few statements about these particular issues or these particular approaches. And so I wrote something up and I forwarded it to her, but I let her know that I wanted to use it for one of our general meetings, as well as this particular webinar. So we're going to revisit that particular document. We're going to talk about identity politics, what it is, and the impact that it has on our struggle, and the trap of identity politics. There's some good and there's some bad. And in certain situations, the bad outweighs the good. And we're going to look at that. We're going to look at the campaigns of the party, or at least two campaigns. One is local. When I say local, it's a campaign that is located in the Pittsburgh and Allegheny County area. And so it's a local campaign. The other campaign, we would like this campaign to become more of a national campaign. And that's the campaign around reparations and Black self-determination. Then we want to have a brainstorming session and just hear from everybody who's on your ideas, your suggestions about the kind of work that we should be doing as an independent Black political party and what direction the party should be headed in as we serve the people. And then to kind of wrap it up, any closing comments. So that's the agenda. And the first part of this, which I had mentioned earlier that I wanted to get into, I wanted to revisit the philosophy and platform of the party. And just to go over it, I'm not going to go over it in great depth or detail. For those who would like something more nuanced, I would suggest that you go to one of our YouTube pages and you will find, I do believe, a video of a lengthy presentation that I've done in Philly and maybe some other places. So right now, let's take a look at the platforming program. And again, can you see this? Do I need to do another screen share, or can everyone see this now?
I'm still seeing the agenda.
You still see the agenda? Okay, so let's change up a little bit. All right, can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, see it now.
Okay, great. So we're gonna change this up into a slideshow format. Just give me a second. Okay, so can everyone see this slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So basically, the philosophy and platform of our party, New African Independence Party, and this is the basic module that we use for political education as well as community organizing. This is something that we had originated about 6 years ago, and so we'll just move on. And the content, who we are, why we use the term New African, why the colors red, black, and green, why the Black Panther is a symbol of our party, and what we mean when we say that everything is political. The time is now, and then our platform. Now, if someone needs for me to stop because I'm moving too fast and there's something that you think is important that needs to be addressed, if you aren't able to speak, if you could put it in the chat or find a way to forward it to Brian, or if Tasha is able to get on, forward it to either one of them, and then we can revisit your comments.
Yeah, they can just raise their hand.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Brian. Appreciate it.
Or they can also should be able to send the chat to all the panelists, and I'll keep in it.
All right, great.
Keep track.
So the party was founded in 2012. We really got started and launched in 2014. Our basic mantra is we're anti-racist, we're anti-capitalist, we're anti-imperialist, and we're also a mass-based political party. And so we don't hate white people because they're white, but we definitely are opposed to white supremacy, and we are definitely opposed to any folks who want to do harm to the Black community and to destroy the Black community because of the color of their skin or the color of ours. We're anti-capitalist, which means that we don't think capitalism is the greatest thing since sliced bread as far as the economic system and the economic model. We advocate what we call New African socialism, which means that we believe that as folks of African descent and as Black people here within the United States, the best economic system and model for us is one that is based upon sharing our resources, sharing our skills, and sharing our talents. That doesn't mean that, you know, we all have to drive the same cars and live in the same homes, but it does mean that no one in our communities and neighborhoods should ever be starving. Doesn't mean that we should be tolerant of people in our communities and neighborhoods being homeless, or that our children should be miseducated or not educated properly. And we do believe that all of us within our communities, our African villages, our New African communities, should be able to have access to healthy food, clean air, clean, fresh water, and decent health care. So, you know, basically, when we say we're anti-capitalist, that's kind of what it boils down to. We think that the people who do the work should control the products of their labor. We think the people who actually do the work should have to say so over how any, what people refer to as surplus value or profit, how that surplus value or profit is going to be distributed. So if we're doing the work, we should have the final say so over who's going to get paid what and who deserves maybe to get paid an extra bonus or not. That should not come from someone else who's not really doing the work. All they're doing is pushing pencils and trying to look important. We believe that resources should be controlled by the people, not by one or two people, but by the people collectively, right? I think about the ways that indigenous people all around the world, think about the way that most indigenous people all around the world thought of their relationship to the earth. And the earth is what provides the natural resources, you know, which enable us to live, to survive, and to develop technology. So it's the earth that gives us the water and the minerals and the silver and the gold and the chemicals and all the other things that we use, right? So if you remember or just reflect on how, you know, before the advent and before the rise of capitalism is the dominant economic model, oftentimes indigenous people didn't ascribe individual ownership rights to natural resources. The natural resources belong to all the people. So nobody could claim that it was just their water, or nobody could claim that this land was just their land. The land belonged to all the people who lived in the area, and everybody had access to it. And so we want to get back into that type of thinking. We think that the people who work should make the determination about who gets paid and how they get paid. And we think that natural resources should belong to the community and should belong to the people and not to one or two, three corporations. And so that's why we say we're anti-capitalist. We're anti-imperialist because we don't think that any of us should have a right to invade somebody else's country and take over their stuff just because we don't agree with, you know, the prices that they want to offer, or we don't think that they should have it. So because we don't have it and we don't think they should have it, then we get our Marines and our armies and our navies and our military people together and we invade their country and take over their natural resources. That's imperialism. Imperialism also comes in the shape and form of cultural types of imperialism, where you demonize people's religions and values and their culture, and you demonize the people themselves, you know, maybe based on their skin color or their body shape and things of that nature. So you demonize them, you demonize their history and their culture, you demonize the things that they believe in, and then you impose your own thing. That's imperialism. That's cultural imperialism. So there's cultural imperialism, there's economic imperialism that I spoke of earlier, that's driven through military force. There's a political imperialism where people aren't allowed to, you know, govern themselves and manage themselves based on their own systems. You impose your system on them, even though their system is not working well. I'm sorry, even though your system doesn't work well for them. It's like somebody, you know, trying to force a shoe on your foot that doesn't fit, right? It fits them, but it's either too big for you or it's too small for your foot. But they expect you to be happy with wearing their size shoe. And so that's what imperialism does. So we're also a mass-based political party, which means that we're a party that is grounded amongst diverse people from amongst the Black community, right? We recognize that our people are indeed diverse in the sense that we come from different parts of the United States. We come from different regions within the United States. We have various backgrounds, various skills, different family structures. We worship different gods. We have different cultural practices. And it was that way, by the way, before we were enslaved, right? On the continent of Africa, there was a lot of diversity, and there still is. And so we're a mass-based political party. We don't basically demand that everybody walk the same, talk the same, worship the same, or worship at all. The only thing that we demand is that people respect one another, follow the platform, follow your leadership, not blindly follow your leadership, but follow your leadership. And if you engage in criticism, which we encourage you to do, make sure your criticism is based on principle and not emotion. So we also believe in utilizing the best ideas, ideals, practices, and traditions of other movements that have came before us and the movements that exist today. So we're not egotistical. We don't think that we know it all. We don't think that, everybody has to listen to us. We definitely believe that we need to draw from the past, and we definitely believe we need to study the present. Okay. So I kind of went over this: anti-racist. We are for Black, New African freedom, liberation, and self or group determination. We are not anti-white people. We are anti-white supremacy. And we support the struggles of all people for freedom and self-determination. Anti-capitalism or anti-capitalist, we say capitalism is the economic model and system which enriches and empowers the few owners at the expense of the majority who do the work. And I'll just scroll all the way down into the last line, which is really appropriate for us as folks of African descent. Genocide and slavery are byproducts of capitalism. Let that sink in. Genocide and slavery are byproducts of capitalism. We live in a country where basically its economic system and its economic model has been predicated upon the genocide that was committed against indigenous people who were here, the confiscation of their land, and the land theft of the people south of the so-called border, the Mexicano people, the theft of their land on the pretext of a phony war. And then last but certainly not least, the enslavement of Africans. So we're dealing with an economic system and an economic model that's based upon genocide, land theft, and slavery. So again, genocide and slavery are the byproducts of capitalism. We're anti-imperialists. I talked about that before. Closely connected to imperialism is what we call colonialism and also neo-colonialism. And we could talk about those things at some other point and get into the details of it. The old style of imperialism was basically to send in the gunships to threaten people, invade their country, assassinate their leaders, disrupt their economies. The more modern methods that imperialism uses now are connected to banking and finance. So they use institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to create financial crises between and among basically nations of color, nations that have emerged from the years and years and years of European colonialism and domination. And so now in order for those mostly European countries to maintain their control and to maintain their dominance, what they use now are banking and financial institutions. And they also use the weakness of those leaders and the greed of those leaders in those respective countries as well. But that's another subject we'll get into at some other time. I talked about us being a mass-based political party. We are a revolutionary political party rooted among the diverse masses of Black or New African people residing within the United States. Major influences: Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, SNCC, Black Panther Party, as well as the Republic of New Africa. I would also include a group called the African Blood Brotherhood that emerged in the early part of the 20th century. Please make a note, if you get a chance, read about the African Blood Brotherhood. They were like the Black Panther Party of their era. Very interesting in terms of how they developed. And this is just a discussion that we would have in the regular class. We use New African. We originated from the many tribes, nations, ethnicities, and religions throughout the African continent. We are united through the common experiences of capture, enslavement, resistance, and survival. We are connected to the contiguous states and territories of the southern US. We are shaped and molded over centuries of oppression and struggle. Get a chance, we can talk about this in more detail. Red, black, and green, those are the colors. The Black Panther, that's also incorporated as part of our logo. And politics, the struggle concerning the acquisition and distribution of power and resources. So for us, politics is much more than just pushing a button or going behind a curtain or a screen and writing down your favorite candidate. Everything is political. And we say that our lives are shaped and influenced by politics, where we are born, where we go to school, our neighborhood, our social and our economic status. I would even go as far as to say even where we are buried. That definitely was a truth in years past. Oftentimes, enslaved Africans, and even after slavery had been found to be illegal, or even after slavery had ended, oftentimes because of Jim Crow, Black people, even upon death, were still subject to the forces of white supremacist politics. And so Black people could not even in death find peace. Black people could not be buried next to white people. They had separate so-called Negro cemeteries. And sometimes these cemeteries were put together voluntarily because Black people, former slaves, or the children and grandchildren of former slaves wanted their own thing, right? But in many situations in the years before and the years after, Black people just wanted to have a resting place for their loved ones. And white supremacists would not allow Black people to be buried in the same areas as white people. So Black people were forced to be buried somewhere else, you know, still finding no peace even after death. So everything is political. The time is now. We conclude by making the point that both mainstream political parties have failed to address the plight of Black or New African oppression within the context of white supremacy and economic injustice. Both the Democrats and Republicans are parties of white supremacy. We currently have thousands of Black elected and appointed public officials, but still we have no justice. And we want our freedom, and we define freedom in very specific ways. We say, number one, we want the power to determine the destiny of our families, neighborhoods, and communities. We want the power to determine the form, the type, and function of all the institutions that impact our lives. For example, businesses, schools, as well as the police. We want the freedom from poverty, ignorance, racism, white supremacy, homelessness, social disease, and unmitigated state violence. So we try to be very specific and define freedom in very material ways. So it's not just an abstract concept, because oftentimes people can say, oh, okay, well, you're already free. You're no longer dealing with chattel slavery, right? And so we try to be very specific in terms of how we define freedom, right? The freedom to vote is a great freedom, but the freedom to vote is not the type of freedom that's really gonna help us as Black people as we move forward. It's a tool to be used, but it's what we call like a procedural freedom, right? But it's not a substantive freedom. Like in the United States, you know, you have the freedom to vote, and you have the freedom to march, you have the freedom to protest, but those are procedural freedoms, right? Substantive freedoms would be your freedom to be able to not starve to death, or your freedom to not be homeless, right? Those are substantive freedoms. Those are freedoms that really mean a lot. And those freedoms do exist in other countries. In some countries, they don't have homelessness because it's not permitted. If you're a homeless person, you're like, how, why? And somebody's gonna scoop you up and find some decent housing for you. Those are the types of societies that we want to create, where it's not just about procedural freedom, it's about substantive freedom. Not just the process, not just the procedure, but the actual substance, the end result, the end product. Those are the things that are the most meaningful, not just the image, but the realness of it. The abolition and dismantling of white supremacy. And we define white supremacy as the structures, systems, and institutions which legitimize, empower, and perpetuate the ideas, ideals, and practices of white racial superiority. Racism is an attitude, a belief, and behavioral predisposition that is based on notions of racial superiority and or inferiority. The racism of whites is only significant because of white supremacy. We could talk about this forever. Some people disagree. Some people conflate racism and white supremacy like they're the same thing, and they're not. Our position is that anybody can be racist, including Black people. And people say, no, Black people can't be racist because we ain't got no power. And, you know, for those of us or anybody who knows about the criminal justice system, if you think Black people and other people can't be racist, then walk into the middle of a prison yard after there's been a fight between, say, you know, some Black folks, some brown folks, maybe some Asian folks, depending on what part of the country you live in. And then let's talk about who can't be racist amongst who, right? Anybody can be racist. Anybody can have that attitude, belief, and predisposition based on what they perceive to be racial superiority of their group versus the racial inferiority of another group, right? You don't have to have power to be racist. You can be a powerless, uneducated, ignorant person and still be racist, right? We see that throughout American history and throughout American society, because we have very well detailed and documented episodes of poor white people, right? Oftentimes uneducated white people who were cold-blooded racists. They didn't have no real power. They just had the privilege that comes along with living it in a society that's based upon white supremacy, right? So anybody can be racist. You don't have to be powerful to be racist. The thing that gives the racism of white people the power that it has and the privileges that they enjoy is what we call white supremacy. It's the fact that the structures, the systems, and the institutions legitimize and empower as well as perpetuate those ideas of their superiority. So, well, it's something that is controversial. It's the position of the party. Some people don't agree with it. I just say, look at reality. Anybody can really be racist. You don't have to be a powerful person to be racist. But the power of white supremacy is what basically empowers the racism of white people. So we say we want reparations, and this is just general slavery, state-sanctioned terrorism, and Jim Crow. Political prisons, we want freedom from for all political prisoners, especially those of the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army, Leonard Peltier from the American Indian Movement, and the anti-imperialist movement allies and comrades, as well as those politicized prisoners. Politicized prisoners would have been those folks who, when they went to prison, they didn't go into prison for any serious political act. You know, they weren't part of a movement, weren't part of a radical revolutionary group organization. But during the course of their incarceration, they changed, they developed a strong political consciousness. They sought to educate and teach others. They resisted against the prison officials. They pushed back to create change within the prison environment. And because of all those things, they were punished. Those folks are politicized prisoners. Maybe two of the greatest politicized prisoners that we could think of in recent years. Well, I wouldn't say in recent years, I would say historically would be Malcolm X and George Jackson. So think about them as the type of people that I just described. Malcolm X went into prison. He had been a drug dealer, drug user. He had been a pimp. He had been a stick-up guy, right? And then he transformed himself. Then he helped to transform others while he was incarcerated. And he continued that journey upon his release. George Jackson went into prison as a teenager for a gas station stick-up. And while he was in prison, he went through the same type of transformation, and he became a revolutionary, and at some point became the field marshal for the Black Panther Party. But as we all know, he was assassinated and murdered before he was able to leave prison. Proportional representation, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but we believe in proportional political representation, economic representation, as well as judicial. You know, it's about anywhere from 40, I would say anywhere from 45 to maybe as high as 50 million Black folks in this country. Based on those numbers, we should have a certain number of Black people as governors, as members of the House of Representatives, and as members of the US Senate. Also, a certain number of Black people should have federal judgeships, and also a certain number of Black people, you know, should be represented on all levels of government as well as business. So if you live in a city, for example, where 15% of your population is Black or New African, then you should be able to demand that 15% of all the business contracts coming through the city or the county or the state, depending on the numbers, that percentage reflect the Black population. So you should never be comfortable living in any city, in any municipality, where there's not a balance between the number of Blacks who live in that municipality and the availability of contracts for economic development that are awarded to Black businesses, right? You should never be comfortable with that type of imbalance. If you live in a city where your population is 25% Black or New African, but the Blacks only get 5% of all the business contracts from your city, from your state, or from your county, you need to organize to fight. You need to organize to push back against that and demand proportional economic representation. War on drugs and mass incarceration is but an extension of the COINTELPRO type efforts to control and to criminalize and contain Black folks and other people of color, as well as dissidents, as well as dissident white folks. The war on drugs and the mass incarceration phenomena that came out of it is a tool that's used to maintain white supremacy and economic injustice. We want a comprehensive King, Malcolm, and Chavez plan. People have asked, well, who is Chavez? We're talking about Cesar Chavez, right? Cesar Chavez was a organizer, union leader, and organizer basically for immigrant workers, basically for Mexicano and other Mexicano and Filipino farm workers. I would suggest, and this is just a point, look up a group called the United Farm Workers and look up the United Farm Workers movement and look up Cesar Chavez and look up, he had a couple of partners, and one was a gentleman who was a Filipino organizer. That's how the United Farm Workers got together. It was the Filipino workers and there was the Mexicano workers, and they were the core, and they got together and started this United Farm Workers movement, and they had the United Farm Workers Union. And there was a sister who's part of this too, and she's still living. I cannot remember her name. She's a phenomenal woman from the Mexicano community. And she's still around today. Her politics is are not as radical as ours, not as revolutionary as ours, but they did a lot of good work. And so going back some years, there was a real good relationship between groups like United Farm Workers and the Black Panther Party, right? Is to fight hard to bring about justice for farm workers, immigrant farm workers, and so forth and so on. So we want to maintain that type of spirit. We want to maintain that this urban plan is a plan that's going to benefit Black people, but it's going to benefit other people too. All right, so I talked about proportional economic participation. For example, if Blacks or New Africans are 30% of your population, then they should get a minimum 30% of all government contracts. Formerly incarcerated and convicted, real basic and fundamental. We want to call for general amnesty. We want a restoration of human and civil rights. We want to examine and remove all oppressive collateral consequences and barriers to personal redemption, reform, and rehabilitation. And there's a reference there. It's a movement called the FICPM. Actually, there's another letter that's been added to this, but if you go there, you should be able to track it down. It's formerly incarcerated and convicted peoples and families movement. So that's the new name. It used to be called the FICP, the formerly incarcerated and convicted peoples movement. Education, our areas of concern are around financing, curriculum, personnel, and method, and the impact of school consolidations and closings. We're open and we support all educational models. We're not a group that says, oh, it's just about supporting public schools. Yes, the bulk of our children continue to go to public schools, but the public school system has been severely compromised, and we know that. We got to keep it real. You know, yes, there's some very good teachers and we support those good teachers, but we know there's some very opportunistic teachers who don't really care about Black children. They don't care about brown children. They don't even care about white children, no other children, right? They're opportunists. They're about their careers. They have a lot of union support from the teachers' unions. And some of the teachers' unions are righteous and they do the right thing, but not all of them do. And oftentimes teachers' unions will push back against Black people organizing amongst themselves, trying to have independent schools or charter schools of any type, or home schools, right? Or community-based schools. So what we say is the door is wide open. Any model that can serve the best collective interests of Black youth and Black parents and making sure that their children are going to be educated, we support those models. So we're not exclusive to public schools, regardless of what the teachers unions say. We ain't exclusive to them, right? We're not going to play that political game, okay? Our thing is we support public schools, and public schools are doing the right thing. We also believe in community-based schools. We also support homeschools. We support charter schools, and we support technical and trade schools. And that's important because in most situations, schools are funded through tax dollars. So we want to demand and say in how our tax dollars are going to be allocated towards the education of our children. And we don't believe that tax dollars need to go to just the so-called public schools, because the so-called public schools don't always do a great job. We know that. If we look at our public school systems in Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia, in Chicago, right, in Cleveland, in Detroit, we could go on and on and on. All of these public schools are suffering, okay? A lot of it is not just the school system, it's the community, right? It's the local communities, it's the city, the county, the state, and the national community. You can't expect schools to be 100% functional if you're living in a dysfunctional country. You can't expect schools to, you know, be at the top of their game when the people who run the country are not at the top of their game. You know, in other words, you know, you can't, you know, you can't get blood from a rock, right? So if you're dealing with a dysfunctional society, when I say dysfunctional, you're dealing with a society that's predicated upon racism, white supremacy, and economic injustice, then that's going to have an impact on the quality of life of the people, the parents, and it's going to have an impact on the quality of life of the children as well. And they're going to bring that stuff to school. And sometimes schools are some of the best places for children, or they have been some of the best places for children to get some relief, right? Whether it was free breakfast, free lunch, whether it was after school programs, whether it was real, genuine, compassionate teachers and instructors, and sometimes just a healthy, nurturing environment, whether it was sports, it was art, music, right? But a lot of the children, especially a lot of the low income, working class children, they come from dysfunctional situations. And I'm not talking about their parents being dysfunctional. I'm saying dysfunctional in the sense that the neighborhoods are jacked up, the communities are jacked up. You know, the requirements that the parents have to fulfill are just not balanced, okay? Some of us, we come from an era where, you know, mostly the dad had to work, your mom might work part-time, but there was someone around the house to help with your development. A lot of our young people today, that's kind of missing because everybody got to work, right? And in some situations, you only have one parent in the home trying to hold it down, right? So it's a lot of stress. It's a different type of social dynamic and social fabric, and it will have an impact on whether or not children can do the very best that they could possibly do. And it will have an impact on the output years later. And you know, I don't have to preach to you guys. You know, we have people who are graduating from high school and they have high school diplomas, but they can barely read on the 8th and 9th grade level. Some of them can't do anything past 6th grade mathematics, right? So for us, and you know, maybe I'm spending too much time on this, but I think it's so important. We're open to any educational model that can best educate our children and strengthen our communities, whether it's public schools, community-based schools, home schools, charter schools, technical trade schools, and any tax dollars need to be allocated to any of those models, right? So we believe that public money that's being collected for schools, some of that money needs to go to families who do homeschool. Some of that money needs to go to different neighborhoods. We have a community-based school. We believe in supporting anything that's going to help our people to become better people and to help our children to learn as much as they possibly can. National Civilian Police Review Board, empowered to investigate all police-involved shootings. And you can read this stuff on your own. But yeah, so that's just one of the things that we've been pushing. Healthcare, free and universal healthcare. We believe that Black or New Africans, we continue to suffer disproportionately from what we define as socially constructed and reinforced diseases. So these are socially constructed diseases, and they're basically reinforced, such as substance abuse, such as high blood pressure, such as diabetes, and such as post-traumatic stress syndrome. All of this kind of stuff is like the byproduct of years and years of oppression and exploitation, and of adopting to that oppression and exploitation, oftentimes in an unhealthy way. You know, you drink too much, you smoke too much, you use stuff in your body that you shouldn't be using because it's not good for you, right? Or you eat the wrong types of foods, or you eat too much of even the right type of food. And so a lot of this stuff is a byproduct of decades and decades of being oppressed. And it really goes back historically to just the whole enslavement period that we went through and the Jim Crow period. You know, I come from a group of people who, when I was a child growing up, we ate, you know, and this is not to be offensive to those who still eat pork, but I came from a family situation where we ate every part of the pig, and I mean every part of the pig, right? And we, you know, we had a lot of salty food, a lot of pork, not once a week, but you know, too many days. We had a lot of salty pork food. I came from a situation where, you know, we drank, we hustled, you know, we smoked weed, we popped pills, we shot dope, we did a whole bunch of stuff, right? As no doubt a coping mechanism, like a coping type of mechanism, a dysfunctional coping mechanism to deal with the things that we were being subject to at that time, right? So in terms of healthcare, we advocate free and universal healthcare for all people, not just for our folks, not just for Black folks, not just for New African folks, but for all people. We recognize that we continue to suffer disproportionately from what we define again as socially constructed and reinforced diseases, such as substance abuse, high blood pressure, diabetes, and post-traumatic stress syndrome, which has had a tremendous impact on the Black community as far as our mental health status, in the street, in prisons as well. And it's something that really, we could have a whole panel discussion just dealing with this stuff. It's very serious. The environment, we keep it plain. We want clean air, clean water, healthy food, and environmental justice. That's that last part, like environmental justice. A lot of us don't pay attention to this, but depending on, you know, where you live within your city, in Cleveland, in Detroit, in Pittsburgh, in Philly, in LA, wherever, you probably have some toxic waste dumps in some neighborhoods that are probably predominantly Black, brown, and most certainly, if they're white neighborhoods, they're low income, poor, working class white neighborhoods. Businesses, corporations, even city government, even county government, what they've done conveniently is to put these dump sites in those particular areas, because they know, you know, most of those people, most of our people, we don't understand the relationship between these dump sites in our community health. We don't seem to have too much political power, so we don't know how to organize amongst ourselves to push back. But if you do your own examination, you know, just kind of look at where you live and ask some questions, do your own research. Well, you know, where's the dump sites at? You know, where are the dump sites located? And what you will invariably find is that the majority, if not all of these dump sites, in terms of construction work, development work, whatever, garbage stuff is located in some area where, you know, it's poor people, working people, low income people, Black people, brown people, poor white people there. So that's the thing about environmental justice. So we want clean air, clean water, healthy food, and environmental justice. We want housing. We demand safe and affordable housing. We want the community control of any development and not gentrification. And universal debt relief. We want debt relief for all people making $250,000 or less. And you know, we contend that many people throughout the United States are overwhelmed by unreasonable debt, especially bad mortgages and student loans. You know, now think about this. These are the things that we've been standing on for several years. Now the things that we've been advocating and standing on for the last several years or so are now being embraced and repeated by other people, you know, so-called liberal progressive members of the Democratic Party, folks involved in the movement and some other areas. Now they're basically repeating what we've been saying all along about the impact of debt, and not just debt in general, but especially housing debt, bad mortgages, as well as student loans. So we've been ahead of the curve. And last but not least, we call for a national plebiscite, which is a vote by Black or New African people concerning our decisive and political relationship to the United States, dealing with issues of self or group determination, autonomy, and sovereignty. And we want this national vote, so to speak, we want to be supervised by the United Nations. Because, you know, we are indeed a separate people, right? Yeah, we have diversity. And the reason I say we're like a separate people, because it's not because we necessarily want to be. I think a lot of Black folks in this country would love to be fully integrated within the United States. Really, I think a lot of us would. But I think that the reality is that the majority of Black people realize that we are looked upon collectively as a different group. And even though we may not want it to be that way, that's the reality. And you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, just look at all the incidents that happen when people get pulled over by the police. Police don't know whether they're pulling somebody over who has a GED or a PhD. They don't know. They don't know whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, or you out there hustling. They don't know. All they know is you Black. And you may have a certain type of car. Or maybe they just trying to fill their quota for the week. And so they pull you over. And when they interact with you, unless you're some celebrity that they recognize, they're going to interact with you the same way they interact with any other Black person who they pull over. If the cop is racist, if the cop is belligerent, if the cop is prone to be violent, he's going to be the same way, whether he's dealing with a Black person who's a Muslim, a Black person who's a Christian, or a Black person who believes in no God at all, right? So we are looked at differently in this country. We're looked at as a body, right? Now they teach it's all about American individualism. But when it comes to Black folk are looked upon as a group, and they deal with us as a group. They don't discriminate unless they have to. So if I get pulled over, and if I'm sitting in the car with Michael Jordan or Oprah Winfrey, and if the police recognize Oprah or Michael, I might get treated a little differently because I'm sitting in the car with them. But if they don't recognize either one of them, we all gonna be treated like niggas straight up. And so that's just the reality of it. So again, we calling for this national plebiscite, a vote concerning our decisive and political relationship to the United States, dealing with issues of self or group determination, autonomy, sovereignty, and we want to be supervised by the UN. And these are some of the discussion questions that we normally would ask people. I just want the group here to think about this as we look down to right here. What is the current political relationship of Blacks or new Africans within the United States? And think about how this would apply to you, right? Do you consider yourself to be a full citizen? Are you a domestic colonial subject? Do you consider us collectively to be a non-sovereign nation? Are we some of the above, all of the above, or none of the above? And then ask yourself, what is self-determination? What is sovereignty? And what is autonomy? And how does it relate to you individually, your family, your community, and how does it connect to us as the collective Black folk here, 45 to 50 million strong? And that is it for this part of it. And now we can entertain any questions or comments. I think people had something in the chat. Brian, is that true?
No, let me double check it. We just had some comments.
Okay, so you want to, is there anything that we need to share with everyone? Or can everyone see
I
the
think
comments?
probably in the interest of time, we can move on.
All right, sounds good.
If you want to bring back up the agendas.
Okay. Okay, so the struggle continues. Where to from here during the Trump-Biden transition? So as we all know, Donald Trump lost the election. He lost the electoral college vote, and he lost the popular vote. And Trump is contesting the results. He's basically pushing back, saying that the election was rigged. And he's filed several suits in different courts, and he's lost. Most recently, he had filed a suit with the U.S. Supreme Court, and he lost that one too. I think the final vote was 7-2, right? I'm not sure what his next move is. Maybe some of you have, came across some more recent information as far as Trump's team, what they plan to do next. But it appears as if Joe Biden is going to take office next month. I think inauguration is I think it's January the 20th, if I'm not mistaken. And please, look it up.
Correct.
Okay.
It is January 20th.
Okay. So Biden is scheduled to take office January the 20th. So according to the United States Constitution, no matter what Trump says, no matter what he alleges, January the 20th, he has to, January the 20th, he has to vacate the White House. Now, that doesn't mean he, won't continue to plead his case and file petitions and so forth and so on. But January the 20th, Trump has to vacate the White House. A new administration has to be sworn in. And then there's going to be the process of the cabinet selections that Biden had proposed, that those cabinet selections would have to be approved by the Senate. At least in most cases. There's some people that he selected that don't need Senate approval, but some of the big jobs certainly are going to need Senate approval. So this is what's going on now, and we have forces on the Donald Trump side who are adamant about defending Donald Trump and who firmly believe that the election was rigged. And it's not just so-called white militia groups or militia groups period, because all the militia groups are not lily white. They're Black and brown people who are involved in these militia groups that support Donald Trump and support his politics. But it's not just the armed groups, it's not just the militia groups. We're talking about traditional bona fide US politicians. We're talking about at least 10, maybe like 11 or 12 governors who went on record to support Trump's petition that was submitted to, I think, the US Supreme Court, which was subsequently denied. We're talking about dozens of members from the House of Representatives, dozens, who are basically supporting Donald Trump. We're talking about governors, we're talking about folks in the US Congress and in the US Senate who to date, even as we meet and speak, have not publicly acknowledged Joe Biden as the president of the United States. This is very important. This is a very important phenomenon for us to look at and look at it very seriously. Excuse me, I was just getting to sip some juice. Because this has all the looks of something that occurred over 100 and some years ago that was the precursor to what we now know as the United States Civil War. Back in those years, it was during the campaign of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln being a Republican, at that point, the Republican Party was a party that at the core was opposed to slavery. And, you know, Lincoln was what you call an abolitionist, but there were different types of abolitionists, right? Just like today, we have people who call themselves this and call themselves that, but, you know, the degree or type varies. And so you had the abolitionists like Abraham Lincoln, you had the abolitionists like Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, but you had the abolitionists like John Brown. And so all of these people were part of the movement called the abolitionist movement. And they all believed that slavery should be abolished, right, to a greater or lesser extent. Some people thought that slavery should be abolished at some point in the future, 5, 10 years later. It should be a gradual process. Some people thought that slavery should be maintained, but it should be contained. In other words, those states that already had slavery established as their social and economic system, those states should be allowed to keep that. But any new states or territories coming into the so-called union would not be allowed to practice slavery. Some people who were abolitionists thought that new states and territories should be able to decide for themselves whether they wanted to be state or free. And then there were other forces who were abolitionists like John Brown, who basically said we should get all the guns and ammunition and people we can and destroy this joint, period, right? So we have a situation, well, let's go back to the situation then. There were certain Southern states who said that if Abraham Lincoln, the Republican candidate, even though he was a wishy-washy type of abolitionist, right? They said that if Abraham Lincoln became the president, they was going to leave the Union. They were going to secede from the Union. That's the term, secede, right? Basically, we're going to separate. That if Lincoln becomes the president, we're going to separate from the Union. And one of the states that kept pushing that was South Carolina, right? And so indeed, we know the history. Lincoln became the president. South Carolina seceded from the Union. Other states started to follow. Things got kind of, jittery. Lincoln reached out to the Southern states. He tried to reconcile with them. I mean, he was trying to cut all types of deals with these dudes. He was saying, you keep your slaves, or maybe you can let them go gradually in the next 5 years or so, or you could just keep them, but just don't have any more slaves. He was trying to cut all types of deals with these guys, man, because he was a lukewarm, wishy-washy type of abolitionist guy. But to make a long story short, we know what happened. The United States went to civil war, and anywhere from 750,000 to 1 million people died. Right, one of the biggest battles was held up here in the state of Pennsylvania, right, Gettysburg. So as students of history, we need to look at the moment that we currently live in, right? So we have a president who many of us would describe as a neo-fascist. And he's basically resisting. He's saying, like, I'm gonna stay. I don't care what you say. I'm gonna stay. And he has people who are willing to support him, not just willing to support him with their money or supporting with their political power and influence, but he has continues of people around this country who are willing to support him with their arms militarily. That's a very dangerous predicament that we find ourselves in today. We have Biden, who many people would describe as a neoliberal, right? And I don't mean neoliberal like it's a good thing. Look it up. We can talk about it. Basically, someone who's all about maintaining the American empire, the U.S. empire. He's just gonna do it a little differently, with a softer touch, right? So he's not about dismantling U.S. white supremacy or dismantling U.S. imperialism or changing capitalism. He's about maintaining all of that. He's just about doing it in a different way. And that's the thing that many of us have to come to see, is that the battle between the Trump faction and the Biden faction, or the battles internally that happen between different factions of the Democratic Party or the factions within the Republican Party. These folks are not fighting over whether or not the empire should be dismantled, right? They're fighting about who can best manage the empire and what is the best style of management. They're not fighting to create situations that we described earlier, right? In terms of dealing with environmental justice, dismantling racism, white supremacy, embracing the greater distribution of wealth and resources for all the people. That's not what this battle is about. This battle is really about who is the best manager of the US empire, who can best steer this ship in a certain direction where it doesn't completely fall apart. Who can best fool the people into thinking that this is really about them, while the multinational businesses and corporations continue to get, more and more wealth, right? So when we understand that the ruling class, unlike, a lot of the rhetoric that many of us may have grown up on, we say, yeah, white people, they always come together and they do this and they do, that's not true. The white ruling class, they be fighting like hell amongst themselves about what faction is going to control and what faction is going to have the most power, right? They've been going through this for decades, and they will continue to go through it for decades. So even though they're unified around maintaining white supremacy, and they're unified about maintaining economic injustice and exploitation, what we call capitalism at home and imperialism abroad, even though they're unified about that, they have disagreements about management. They have disagreements about style. Trump's style is very, obnoxious to a lot of them. They don't like Trump's style. Now, if you look at Trump's policies, his policies have been beneficial to a lot of these guys, but they don't like his style. They don't like, how he interprets stuff. They don't like how he moves, right? So they want someone who they think is a better representation of the American ideal, right? So, that's why if you look at, you got a lot of Democrats and even some Republicans, now they holding up Barack Obama, like, oh yeah, Barack Obama, the good old days. Yeah, good old days for who? It was just a good old days in terms of the image, not the substance, but the image, Ivy School, educated president, Black man. So he's supposed to represent some symbol of justice, beautiful family, children, articulate, easygoing, thinks before he speaks, supposedly able to control the Black community because he had this certain type of appeal. All this stuff was just image, nothing substantive, right? And so they look at people like him as being able to present a certain image, not just throughout the country, but abroad as well. And that image is consistent with the mythology of American democracy, right? And America being this great place, America being this good place for everybody. So he did a good job at managing the American empire. Now, the other stuff that people don't want to talk about is the fact that he expanded the US presence throughout Africa, through Afrikan. He also, every morning, literally just about every morning, he would check off on different drone strikes and different drone attacks, basically bombing and blowing up people in mostly African, Asian, and Muslim countries around the world. The fact that he supported and he helped to orchestrate the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi, which led to the destabilization of Libya, which led to just a insane situation where now you have these renegade folks running through Libya, and these people who are anti-Black African, who are engaging in the enslavement of Black Africans, right? Something that Gaddafi would have never tolerated. Gaddafi was probably one of the greatest champions of Pan-Africanism in the last 50, 60 years, right? Which made him a big threat to the United States. So those are some of the things that we need to look at, the time period that we're in. Where do we go from here during the Trump-Biden transition? So I want to stop here for a moment. We are on pace. We should be okay. But I want to stop here for a moment for any comments or questions. Brian, Tasha, if you could help me out, if people have some comments or questions they want to share. Anyone?
Yes,
yeah. Okay. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You can go ahead.
Yeah, Khalid, yeah, I agree with what you were saying about Obama. And I really feel like that's where our people, I think that's where one of our weaknesses, and it always has been one of our weaknesses, where they fall in love with the image and don't really do their homework and really research it and to see what he's really done. And I wonder what would really be the approach to bring like awareness to our people to really get them to understand how these things work, as far as, like really getting strong enough to have I want to say a group of people that don't fall for those things.
Yeah, that's a good point, brother. That's a good question. I think it really depends on us. We have to continue to educate ourselves more, and then educate our people and educate the general community, so we can have a much more sharper and nuanced political perspective. Most of us, we get our politics, or at least we get our political perspective from watching traditional news sources, channels. Sometimes, we get it through social media as well. And most of the news channels that the majority of us watch are, for example, ABC, CBS, NBC or MSNBC, Fox. Most of those news channels and outlets, they either support the Republican Party or they either support the Democratic Party. That's about it. That's about it. If you watch something like Democracy Now!, right, with Amy Goodman, then you'll get a different perspective that is a little different, right? Is more radical, but ultimately is pro-Democratic Party, for real, when it comes to electoral politics. You have to search far and wide to get some other perspectives that are critical of the two mainstream political parties, and that give you a much more expansive perspective as far as the world, right? But many of us don't do that. And I mean, I can understand them. If you're working, or if you're dealing with your children, you're in the home, especially now with the pandemic, you want to turn on TV, maybe get some entertainment, get some relaxation. If you watch the news, you're going to turn to the news station that you know best. And so if you're like a Republican person, you're going to turn on Fox. If you're a Democratic Party person, you're going to turn on MSNBC or ABC or CBS. And that's about it. That's really about it. And those news outlets, they represent corporate news outlets. I mean, it's not a big secret. All you got to do is sit there when you watch the news, just look at the number of commercials that are shown during the broadcast. Well, those are the people who are paying for that news station. Those are the people who are paying for those news reporters and those broadcasters. Those are the people who pay their salary for real, for real. Network news stations, corporate news, corporate America, corporate media. So, you know, we just got to keep working hard, learn as much as we can, learn as much as we can how to think for ourselves. You know, don't go for the okie doke. 2 + 2 is going to never, ever equal 5. It's going to always equal 4. And if it doesn't make sense, it just don't make sense. And so, you know, we have to be forthright and honest, learn as much as we can, try to educate ourselves, try to educate our communities and families as much as we can, and stand up for the truth. Stand up for the truth, even if it's unpopular. Just because it's unpopular doesn't make it untrue. It just means that people don't want to hear it and people don't like it, bad taste in their mouth, right? But it's still the truth. Any other comments?
Yes, Khalid, I wanted to say, like, the irony of the Obama administration is that he did more to keep out Mexican immigrants than this idiot is right now.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. Yeah, he deported more people. He deported more people during his administration than Obama. I mean, I'm sorry, than Trump has during the course of his administration. I mean, that could be a function of Obama being in office for 8, and right now it looks like Trump's going to only be in office for 4. But I think if you look at the numbers, and you guys could do your own research because I don't know off the top of my head. I think if you look at the first 4 years of Obama compared to the first 4 years of Trump, or the last 4 years of Obama compared to the 4 years of Trump, that Obama indeed has deported more people than Trump. Okay, any other comments before we move on to the next part? And again, the question, where to from here? You know, using history as a help, we need to look at the history of what happened just before the U.S. Civil War. We need to look at what's going on now. And also we can look at what happened in Germany before Germany became Nazi Germany. What led to Germany becoming Nazi Germany? What led to Hitler being able to control the German government? You know, a lot of folks think that Hitler came to power like he shot himself, or I'm sorry, that he shot his way in to power. He didn't. He didn't. He used the democratic process that existed in Germany at that time. And he utilized that democratic process to install himself as the basically sole ruler of all of Germany. You know, Germany was a huge country, pretty decent sized population, pretty sophisticated political structure, right? Very similar to what we have here within the United States, as far as, you know, they had like an executive branch, judicial branch, and a legislative branch. And Hitler was able to position himself through his political party and his group to get in power, and then at some point force, I do believe,
Paul von Hindenburg.
Right, exactly. Thank you very much. He forced Hindenburg to let him become the chancellor. So once Hitler was able to become, in essence, it was like he became the president and the speaker of the house. And he had control over what we would call the Supreme Court. So once he basically controlled the 3 branches of government, it was his way or no way. And that's what he did, right? He didn't do it because he had some of his homies get together and they started shooting up people. That's not how it happened. He used the political process that existed at that time, right? And he used a lot of the same rhetoric as Trump. He was able to scapegoat the Jewish community, not just the Jewish community, but the Roma people, what we call the gypsies. There were a handful of Blacks who lived in Germany. There were some people from the LGBTQ folks who lived in Germany as well. And so all of those people were basically scapegoated, especially the Jewish community and the gypsies. And those people found their way into the gas chambers. He was also able to round up even people who were non-Jewish, non-Roma, non-LGBTQ, the people who criticized him from the press and other politicians, because there were politicians who pushed back against Hitler. When Hitler took over, he sent the SS, the secret police, after them dudes, man, criminalized them, locked them up, sent them away, right? So it's something to think about, the time that we're living in, the time that we're living in. So keep your eyes open, keep your ears open. Don't be stupid, right? And try to make the best out of the situation that we're in and tell the truth and stand up for the truth.
But I see comparisons, Khalid, between
absolutely
between this Trump and like I said, the Bear Hall push, and like you know, the burning of the Reichstag, you know, and stuff like that's probably gonna happen. You know, it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So for us in modern times, it could be something like Trump, you know, making a unilateral decision, for example, to attack Iran and setting off a war, and then in the midst of the war, basically suspending the results of the election and basically imposing himself as the president because of the wartime situation, right? Now, I mean, there's really no historical precedent for that to happen, like imposing himself. You know, Roosevelt was president for 4 terms, and he was the last president to be able to do that because not shortly after, but sometime after, they changed the Constitution where you could only be president for 2 terms. But, you know, there have been wartime presidents before Roosevelt. Lincoln was a wartime president, and even during the Civil War, guess what? They had national elections, and Lincoln was reelected. So, you know, what Trump may try to do has no historical precedent, but that doesn't mean he won't try it. Okay, so let's move on. Oh, and also before we move on, Joe Biden himself, if you notice the cabinet that he's pulling together, you know, he's standing on his commitment to like a cabinet of diversity. Well, what does diversity really, really mean? We have to look beyond skin color and gender. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about a little later. Let's move on to the next thing, defining the moment and the movement. And I'm going to stop the share and try to find something else here. Just give me a moment. I think this is what I'm looking for. So this is, and I know we pressed for time. I'm trying to keep going here. Forgive me. We may go a little over, but I promise it won't be that much over. This came about because Sister Chandra had asked me to, you know, think about putting some definitions and some things together around defunding the police, dismantle the police, abolish the police, and community control. And I indicated that I would bring these definitions up for review, critique, and discussion during one of our leadership cadre type of meetings, which we had. And so I just wanted to share it for this particular meeting as well. So, you know, we all know there's been a lot of discussion about defunding the police. And so it's been used as a slogan, and it's been promoted as a tool to push the community, to push the politicians and public officials and the representatives from the law enforcement community to do something different when it comes to the police, right? You got cops and all this money, the military equipment to fund the police. It's been interpreted in different ways. Some people, for those people who wanted to use it as a pushback against the Black Lives Matter movement and against calls for police accountability, they use it as a way to say, oh no, you know, we can't defund the police. If we defund the police, who's going to protect the community? But in essence, defund the police doesn't mean no police. That's not really what it means when you really deal with it. And so we just want to have some discussions about these terminologies. Defund the police in practice is actually a shift in allocating or budgeting resources from police departments to communities, especially Black, brown, and low, you know, income communities, which are disproportionately policed and occupied by law enforcement. This defunding or reallocation is particularly applicable to heavily militarized, federally subsidized police forces in urban and suburban areas. These funds could, for example, be allocated to social service programs and community initiatives instead. And this is basically what folks have been pushing, right? Defund the police in practice means this, that we got a lot of communities and neighborhoods, mostly Black and brown, low income, where they're being overly policed. And when we say overly policed, we mean that, you know, people are going back and forth to the neighborhood store and the police is like rolling down on them, asking them where they're going. People coming home from work, the police is driving up their street, looking at them like they're a criminal suspect, right? That if there's anything that happens in these particular neighborhoods, if there's like a domestic dispute, whereas in other neighborhoods, unless it's already been determined that this dispute is escalated in to the point where people are armed, if there's a neighborhood dispute in a lot of these communities, there's an overreaction. You know, SWAT teams come out for like a domestic call. SWAT teams come out because kids were fighting in the street. In these particular neighborhoods with these particular type of people, there's over-policing. The police oftentimes overreact, right? They act first, think later. So, you know, they go to arrest people for things that they shouldn't be arrested for. They overly criminalize these communities and neighborhoods, so they're over-policed. Also, a lot of these police forces in these urban areas and these suburban areas are heavily militarized. So we have police forces that no longer look like police. They look more like soldiers from the military. And we all know the difference between police and soldiers, right? Police are there to enforce the law, right? Soldiers are there to kill enemies, right? The only time you deal with police in the military is when you're dealing with military police. And military police are there to enforce the law that says that soldiers should do and act a certain way. So that's the difference. But when you have police forces that come into your neighborhood that look more like army people, right, then you have a problem, right? When you have police forces that come through your neighborhood and they have on helmets, they got all types of protective gear, they got, you know, rifles and shotguns, and they got all this type of stuff that normally soldiers have, that's a problem. And so when we talk about defund the police, we're saying this defunding or reallocation is particularly applicable to heavily militarized, federally subsidized police forces in urban and suburban areas, right? And so how did these cops get all this stuff? Well, they got this stuff because there's a program set up where these local police forces can apply to get federal surplus, get federal military surplus. And so that's what they get. So you got cops, you know, you got local police departments, they got AP, they got armored personnel carriers, they got half tracks, right? They got the kind of stuff that you would use if you was actually waging a war against enemies, not trying to enforce the law amongst the citizens and residents of your own country. So defund the police in practice is an actual shift in allocating resources from police departments to communities. And these funds could, for example, be allocated to social service programs and community initiatives instead. So that's the whole thing with defund the police in practice, not the rhetorical stuff, but what it really boils down to. Now, dismantle the police, an initiative to completely dismantle police departments who have a demonstrable history of mismanagement, abuse, misconduct, and violence against the community. Such police departments are to be reconstructed and rebuilt with different management and officers. An example would be the police department of Jennings, Missouri in 2011, which had previously employed Darren Wilson, who was the cop who murdered Mike Brown Jr. in Ferguson in 2014. See, Darren Wilson being the cop who killed Mike Brown, he came from another police department. He came from Jennings. Jennings was so corrupt and it was so crazy that the city council took a vote to dismantle its own police force. They dismantled it and they let everybody go, shut it down. The state police came in and took it over, right? Because they had a history of violence, especially towards Blacks in the area. They had a history of abusing people. They had a history of like abusing money, mismanagement of funds and resources that came through the police department. So it was dismantled, period, right? And I don't think it's been reconstructed, right? I think right now the state police still have jurisdiction over Jennings. I think if you guys could do your own research and find out if it's still dismantled and still under state police jurisdiction, they may have started back again, but they had to start from scratch. Darren Wilson was one of those cops, right? When it was dismantled, he got fired. And so they scattered. So even though he came from a corrupt police department, and 9 times out of 10, he was involved in that corruption, he moved on and got a job as a police officer, literally up the street in Ferguson, Missouri. And then we all know from what happened there. He wound up killing Mike Brown. So dismantle the police. Now there's abolish the police, a demand to completely abolish all police forces based on their historical and current role of protecting the rich and wealthy while containing and criminalizing runaway slaves in the 19th century and immigrants and workers and Black people and people of color in the 20th and 21st centuries in general. Now, this is an ideal call. This is like a truly, truly revolutionary call. We're going to get rid of all the police. Well, that's an ideal. Historically, it makes a lot of sense to make that type of demand based on history, because when you study and you come to understand the role of the police, we understand how police forces here in America, how they were first started, their origin. In the North, they were organized to deal with newly arrived immigrants, because the newly arrived immigrants, right, were looked upon as a threat to those people who have been here for a while, right? And so they were oftentimes stereotyped and they were demonized, right? They couldn't speak English. They had accents. They had funny cultural ways, right? And they probably were prone to criminal behavior. This was the stereotypes that was being promoted in order to justify them being criminalized, in order to justify these police taking control of those folks and locking them in jail. They didn't pay their debts. They couldn't pay their debts, so they put them in debtor prisons, right? Their children would act up, so they were juvenile delinquents, right? So the original police forces were basically organized to protect the interests of the wealthy, right? They became agents of the state on behalf of the rich and wealthy. In the North, it was to contain and to control newly arrived immigrants. And in the South, as we all know as Black folks or New Africans, it was developed to basically catch and contain runaway slaves. So those are the origins of the modern day police force. So yeah, so we could say abolish the police, right? That's a call that's based on history. It's idealistic because if we abolish the police, we know that we walk among real men and women. We ain't walking among angels and saints. And we know that in any society, whether it's capitalist or whether it's socialist, whether it's communist, whether it's African, whether it's European, whether it's indigenous, whether it's post-industrial, whether it's pre-industrial, we know we're going to have some folks who are going to do the wrong thing. And we know we're going to have some folks who are going to try to prey on people who they think are weaker than them, or people who they think can't protect themselves. So we know we're going to have certain people who, for real, just being real, they're going to be predators, because, they don't have to be poor. They can be well off and be, okay, but they still want more for whatever reason. And so how do we check that element within our new society? So that's the question. So the whole thing about abolishing the police, well, how do we protect the people who need protection? What about the children, the youth, the elder, the seniors, the disabled people, the people who are vulnerable, the people who are just learning the ins and outs of life? How do we protect them? What happens, right? So that's something to think about. Last but certainly not least is the call for community control of the police. In theory and practice, police will be representative of the communities that they serve and subject to community oversight regarding hiring, termination, duties, and discipline. The call for community control of the police was very popular years ago. It was something that the Black Panther Party took up and pushed, that Black people should control the police. Black people should, or people within the community, should have the final say-so over the hiring, over the firing, over the discipline, right? And that if people were going to be police officers, they should be representative of those communities and neighborhoods that they serve, that they work in. So they should live in those communities and neighborhoods. They should not be disconnected. I don't know how it is in some of the cities that you all come from, but in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for years, there was a requirement that in order to be a police officer in the city of Pittsburgh, you had to live within the city of Pittsburgh. Well, that was challenged and it was struck down, right? It was modified. It was challenged. It was challenged by the FOP, Fraternal Order of Police, and subsequently it was changed. And so now you could be a Pittsburgh police officer. You don't have to live within the city. Well, what does that mean? So that means that, think about it. Pittsburgh is a city that has a Black population, fluctuates anywhere between 25 and 30%. The majority of Pittsburgh police officers, which right now are approximately about 1,000, the majority of those police officers are white males. And when I say the majority, I mean the majority. I'm talking about 90 to 95% plus are white men, right? So if you have this large fluctuation of mostly white male police officers who don't even live in your city, right? They live somewhere else. They could, it's just a job for them. They come in there, they really have no connection to the people that they're policing. It's just a job. So they could do anything they want to do, because your children don't go to school with their children. Your wife, your spouse don't shop with their wife or spouse, right? You don't socialize together, right? So they can deal with you any way that they want to. So community control of the police, in theory and practice, the police will be representative of the communities they serve and subject to community oversight regarding the hiring, determination, the duties, as well as discipline. I'm gonna stop there around these definitions and open up for any discussion. We are just about done, but any comments, any discussion about this part?
I think the best thing would be community-based police right now. That would be, because they're not going to defund the police. Like just recently in Cincinnati, these cops, they got a pay raise, but they talk about there was some police reform. But I don't know if anybody lives in Cincinnati. I just watched the program where these cops actually got a pay raise. Mm-hmm. And like they said they made some reforms, but I don't really know if they made any.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments about this part as we move on? And we can always come back if you guys have some questions, put them in the chat or whatever, and we can answer those questions or comments. We can read them out when we get to the end of this. Okay. Stop the screen share and go back to this part here. Okay, so yeah. Let's talk about identity politics. And if you notice, number 3 is the trap of identity politics. Oftentimes the Republicans and people on the right, the conservatives, and even some of the Democrats, they use the term identity politics in a negative way. And I can understand why they would use it in a negative way. But identity politics, I'll just put it to you this way. It's like, being able to join with people who you can identify with because you have some common characteristics, and you have some common characteristics that are very visible. right? You know, you're all Black, you're all women. You all maybe worship the same way, or you believe in the same religion, or you practice the same religion. So it could be identity politics based on Islam, on Christianity, based on the Yoruba faith. Could be identity politics based on your gender, you know, Black men, Black women. It could be like identity politics just based on your skin color, or you know, where you recognize yourself as coming from as an African person. So there's some pluses to like identity politics, right? It's the group cohesion, it's the security of numbers, it's the safety, the feeling of safety that comes with the numbers. It's the psychological benefit of knowing that you belong to something bigger than yourself. It's the comfort that comes with being able to communicate and to share things with people, just like we're doing this afternoon. This is a manifestation or an expression of identity politics as well. Black or New African, this is identity politics. So there's some good things about identity politics. We all know, for example, that with the LGBTQ folks, they've developed a brand of identity politics based on sexual persuasion, sexual orientation. So various types, various degrees of identity politics. The trap with identity politics is that if you start to blindly accept this identity in the people who share this identity as your friends, as your compatriots, as your brothers, as your sisters, as your comrades, and you embrace them and you share whatever you have with them without looking a little deeper, without exploring much further. And so that's the trap of identity politics. And one of the things that identity politics can do for people whose identity has been marginalized and who have been victims of oppression and exploitation, one of the traps to identity politics is that our enemies and adversaries can use that as a weapon or tool against us. How? Well, by finding people who look like us, folks who we identify with, the folks who are of the Muslim faith, the folks who are Christians, the folks who are Yoruba, the folks from the LGBTQ community, the folks who are Black, the folks who call themselves New African, the folks who wear their hair the way that we wear our hair, the folks who put their fists up in the air and they got red, black, and green in the background. All that stuff that we identify with, if we're not careful, that can be used as a tool and weapon against our collective best interests. And so what can happen is that our enemies and adversaries who are smart, just like we're smart and we study, they're smart and they study too. And so, you know, think about what they did 12 years ago. 12 years ago, they were able to bring somebody to us who was Black, right? Because he was Black. I mean, come on now, we got to keep it real. Yeah, his mom was white, but his father was Black, right? And they brought somebody in front of us who was Black, who had a connection to the motherland even, because his father was a Kenyan, right? Who was highly intelligent and very articulate, right? Who had some history of community activism and organizing, who had a beautiful wife with children, you know, the kind of things that we as Black people admire, right? And was able to hoop a little bit, could play a little basketball too, right? So he had all the little cultural stuff, all the little imagery stuff that so many of us admire as Black people. And he was young, relatively young compared to a lot of the older politicians who had occupied the White House. And so they brought him in front of the people, especially to the Black community, and said, this is it. And he became our symbol of hope and change. But it didn't work out. He didn't do too much anything for the Black community during the 8 years he was in office. And he basically, you know, perpetuated and defended the same program of white supremacy abroad and economic injustice and militarism. He signed the kill orders to, do the drone attacks and the strikes. He made sure that U.S. corporate interests were well protected and preserved. He pushed back against people who wanted to, stand up and fight for freedom and liberation here. And then he put a lot of us to sleep. Like you put a baby to sleep when you give him a bottle of milk. He put a lot of us to sleep, with the thing of, yes, we can, and I'm your brother, and look at me, I'm Black, that whole thing, right? So that's one of the downsides of identity politics. If we could see it playing itself out even as we speak. Joe Biden, he has a vice president. The vice president elect is a Black woman, right? He sprinkled a few Black and brown faces, right? Black, brown, and Asian faces throughout his cabinet selections. And so a lot of people, especially Black people, we're gonna get real hyped up and get real excited. And what we don't realize is that even though these people share this physical identity with us, and even though they may share some history that is similar to our history, that their politics is the same politics of white supremacy, capitalism at home, and imperialism abroad. That their politics is not the politics of revolutionary radical change and transformation. Their politics will remain the politics of how to best maintain, expand, and manage the United States empire. And so we have to be careful with identity politics. Now, locally, we see it played out because locally, especially within the Black and brown communities, and let's talk about the Black communities specifically, locally within the Black communities in the major urban centers all across the United States, over the last 40 years or so, most of the folks who have been running these centers have been Black people or other people of color. So in cities like Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, New York, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Cleveland, and I'm sure there are a few others. We've had Black mayors. We've had Black men and women who were the mayors of these particular cities, right? And in a lot of these cities on a county level, right, we've had Black people who had some roles within county government, not necessarily the head of a county, but they've had some significant roles in county government. In a lot of these cities, we've had a lot of Black people who have been on city council. In certain cities like Philadelphia, for example, just a few years ago in Philadelphia, everybody who ran the city of Philadelphia, Philadelphia being one of the largest cities in the country and one of the largest Black populations in the United States, everybody who ran the city of Philly was Black. I mean, everybody. The mayor was Black, city council, mostly Black people on Philadelphia City Council, or at least I think the president of Philadelphia City Council at that time was Black. So the mayor was Black, City Council had significant Black presence, the chief of police was Black, the head of the fire department was Black, the head of the school board, Philly, was Black, the congressman, one of the congressmen was Black, maybe one or two of the House representatives were Black. It was just on and on and on. And during that period of time, the overall material conditions of Philadelphia's Black community did not get better. Matter of fact, they got worse. The police continued to shoot and beat people. It was so bad that at one point, the Black police chief of Philadelphia, this is really crazy. And I mean, it's almost comical to say it. The Black police chief, now he was the Black police chief. The police force was so out of control that the Black police chief called the FBI on his own police force because he needed help, right? And he needed them to be investigated so he could have some political ammunition to challenge the FOP and challenge other forces within his own police department. So again, the whole thing with identity politics, it's not just the skin color, it's not the religion, it's not the orientation, it's not that at all. You got to really dig deeper. What do these people really believe in? Not what they say, not what they campaigned on, but look at their practice, right? In the vast majority of cases, You know, they just there to maintain white supremacy. They just there to maintain the economic structure as it currently exists. They won't challenge anything unless they feel challenged by you and I. If we don't challenge them, they ain't gonna move. We got folks in you know, folks in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. If you don't challenge them, they ain't gonna do it. And when I say you, I'm talking about the people. It may not always come from the local people. It may be stuff that's happening nationally that gets them riled up and pushes them to try to do something different so they don't look, so they don't get embarrassed, right? But as far as really taking the initiative to fight for their constituency, most of them don't do that. And most of them take the Black vote for granted because they don't have to work hard for the Black vote. In places like Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, and in places like Philadelphia and Philadelphia County, if you register as a Democrat and you run for office, if you win the primary, you basically won the election because most of the people are registered Democrats. And most Black people, the ones who do vote, they just vote straight Democrat. They don't think about how to use their vote. They just act like robots. And it's just part of the conditioning and brainwashing that all of us have been subject to. Democrat, push the button, vote straight Democrat. Don't think about nothing else. You know, because we see a Black face and they put their fists up in the air, we vote for them. We don't really dig deep into their background. We don't look at their positions in terms of policy. We don't look at, you know, how they did certain things in the past. For example, this most recent election, Kamala Harris, first being the district attorney of San Francisco and then later being the state attorney general for California. She wasn't no friend to the Black community. She was locking up parents because their children missed days of school. And she was proud of that. She'd give a little smile and grin and keep locking people up, right? She took the side of police who came under scrutiny for murdering a Black man. She sided with the police, right? So that's Kamala Harris. Then we get Joe Biden. I mean, we could go on and on with Joe Biden, from the comments he made some years ago about school desegregation to him actually being the architect or the co-architect of the crime bill of 1994. You know, people talk about Clinton. Clinton signed the bill and he pushed it for his political career, but it was Joe Biden who actually was the author or the co-author of the bill. And he, I mean, it's on record. He talked about how we need to tighten up, we need to lock up more people, and we need to build more prisons. And even more recently, when he was asked about defunding the police, he made it clear, I'm not about defunding the police. Matter of fact, we'll probably have to hire another 100,000 police. I mean, he's made that commitment, right? This is Joe Biden, okay? So we got to get away from identity politics in the sense that we got to look deeper than just skin color, than just religion, than just orientation, whether it's sexual, whatever it is. We got to dig a lot deeper than that. The LGBTQ community, they got a lot of Black people acting crazy, right? Like, you know, LGBTQ means that you revolutionary, means that you radical. No, it don't. It don't mean none of that. It just means that you have a certain predisposition as far as your sexuality and your orientation. That don't make you radical. That don't make you revolutionary. No more than you being Black makes you radical, makes you revolutionary. It just means that you have a history of being oppressed and exploited. Or it means that perhaps your current situation is one of oppression and exploitation. It means that you come from a people who were like enslaved, but that don't make you no revolutionary because you're Black. And that don't make you on the right side of history because you're Black. And it don't make you right because you're a woman. Like, you know, the messaging that comes from, you know, the neoliberal wing of mostly the Democratic Party, right? And it's basically white women who feed the garbage to Black women and Black women just regurgitate it. You know, stuff like, y'all need to listen to Black women. No, we don't. We need to listen to people that's going to lead us in the right direction. Just because you're a woman don't mean we got to listen to you. No more than just because I'm a man mean you got to listen to me. But that's the kind of dumb stuff that's being perpetuated throughout the Black community. And that's why, like, our politics is so screwed up, you know? So people are pushing messages out there to keep us separate on multiple levels, whether it's Black men, Black women, whether it's Black people who gay and Black people who straight. whether it's Black folk who Muslim, Black people who Christian, Black people who Yoruba, or Black people don't believe in no God at all. They got us all separated, right? And we keep fighting and banging against each other about nothing because we get caught up into this identity politic that has really become a tool to be used against us, whereas decades ago, it was a tool for bringing us together. So I'm gonna stop there with identity politics. Any comments or questions about it?
Oh, I think we can move on, especially in the interest of time.
Okay. All right. All right. So give me a moment. And okay. So what I like to do now, I like to look at two campaigns. One is around a civilian police review board, and this is a local campaign initiative specific to Pittsburgh area. Is for Allegheny County. Pittsburgh, the city of Pittsburgh, is within Allegheny County. So the city of Pittsburgh has a civilian police review board or a citizens police review board, but there's nothing for the larger area or the county. So locally, we have been pushing this for the last few years or so, last several years. And what I like to do is just to screen share just a little bit of stuff, if I could, about that. So just give me a moment and see if we can get this going here. Okay, so this is a screen share here. This is a screen share from the website, the party's website. And this is the section on past and current activism. And it's just a listing of some of the work we've done over the years. It's not inclusive of everything, but it's just a little synopsis of some of the things that we've engaged in over the last 5 to 6 years or so. And one of the things, again, was this movement for the creation of a civilian police review board. So what I like to do is to take people here. This is the actual petition. So this is a petition that we have put together, and basically focusing on people who are residents of Allegheny County. And I'll just read the text, the original text. Basically, Allegheny County has approximately 130 municipalities with over 100 police departments. And, we wanted to create a civilian police review board that would focus on, bringing some type of order and some type of accountability as far as the different police departments. And unfortunately, last year when this bill came up for vote, Allegheny County Council was shot down. They voted against it. The final vote was 15 members on the county council. The final vote was I think it was 8. I'm sorry, it was 9. It was 9-6, I believe. Or not, was it 9-7? Yeah, 9-6. It was 9-6. So it's been taken up again. There's some other members of Allegheny County Council who are also pushing. And, hopefully the bill will be passed. The bill has some problems though. Our position is that it's flawed to a certain degree. And we made note of that. 2 main areas was around the role of the so-called ombudsman and just how much authority and power that person would have and what kind of impact that would have on the functionality of a board, even though they would have representatives, basically, unless all these municipalities, all these police departments agree to opt in, then it would be very limited. The other thing was around a section of like the proposal that basically lets police officers off the hook if they do some crazy stuff by allowing them to make a claim that they weren't trained. And so our response was, just to sum it up, it was like, you don't need to be trained to not know that you should not strangle somebody to death as they're grasping, trying to get their last breath of air. Or you don't need to be trained to not know that you shouldn't shoot somebody in the back 5 or 6 times as they're trying to get away from you. That's not a function of training. That's just a function of your inhumanity and your stupidity and your disregard for life. But I'm bringing this up because I would encourage people from other cities and states and counties to get involved with organizing a civilian police review board of some type and attach that to demands around defunding the police. Defunding the police is one thing, but we want to have oversight of the police. So we can defund the police, shift the funding and all that, but we still want to have oversight. And that's where these civilian police review boards can be handy. It also serves as an organizing tool and a way to raise the people's consciousness. And if you're in situations where like your police department needs to be dismantled, do that as well. If you have a police department that has a history of being dysfunctional and violent, do everything you can, man, to have it dismantled, right? And then think about what the options might be, whether you can better work with the state police or the county police, or whether you can organize your own police forces made up of people from the community. So I wanted to share this part. And now I want to go to, and quickly, for those of you who have access to Facebook, if you want to see this on your own, more detail, this is the Facebook page. So it's taking some time to come up, so maybe we can overlook it. Oh, here it is here. So this is some of the work that we've done. You can always visit the Facebook page. And this has been basically people from Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, the Civilian Police Review Board initiative here. And this came out of the party's mobilization effort from some years ago. We came up with what we call the National Mobilization Against Police Brutality, the FOP. Okay, we're gonna move away from this and get to what we consider to be a national campaign, or we would like to develop and expand it into a national campaign. And that's the campaign around reparations and Black self-determination. And we want this campaign to be replicated and expanded no matter what city or state or county you live in. So People's Campaign for Reparations and Black Self-Determination. Let me see. Can you all see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so and I'm gonna go over this as quickly as I can. We are a national grassroots campaign organized and led by low income and working class Black people. When you get some time, go to the website, look for reparations. It'll just be reparations. You see reparations, click it. It'll pop up when you're on, go over it. Our mission is reparations and self-determination, and for the pain and suffering, enslavement, and economic exploitation during the periods of slavery, state-sponsored terrorism, and Jim Crow. We also demand release of political prisoners, and we also seek redress and amnesty and the restitution regarding the war on drugs and mass incarceration or its impact. And we want self-determination, or the power to determine their own destiny as a distinct group of people living within the United States, and some other stuff. So get a chance, check it out. You go to the page, you'll see, the different links that make up the campaign. We have a web page, a blog page here. We have a Facebook page. We have a membership group. And there's what we call a national survey, which we always encourage people to take and to use as an organizing tool. We also could use donations to help to pay for the cost of the survey. And some of the results of the survey here, this has to be upgraded. It's kind of behind as far as the numbers, but we've been doing the survey now for about a year or so. And we have people from several states who have weighed in about issues around reparations, proportional representation, in the support and creation of an independent Black nation based in the Southern United States. Get a chance, check it out. So we're just about done. What I'd like to do is, if I could, let's go back to give me a minute here. Okay. All right. So we're just about done. We're a little over. If people have any ideas, any things that you would like to share as far as things that you believe we should be doing in the year coming, in the next couple of years coming, please share it now or put it in the chat. You know, we take it all seriously as we move forward and as we look to the year 2021. So we have a few minutes if you want to talk about anything or questions or things that you think we should be doing or things that we were doing that need to be done better or done differently. Please, more than willing to entertain it and hear it.
Well, I just wanted to talk a little bit about one of the things that I know so the brothers have been doing up here in Ohio is like different events in the community, especially kind of trying to address the issues around fratricide, because we have been having a lot of problems with that. Of course, that's been going on across the country, but especially here in Ohio as well. And no, there's been like a couple of events that we've had. So that's one of the things that we've been probably will be focusing on in the coming, you know, as time moves forward. And then also, I have talked to you about this as well, how we can strategize on which campaigns we can actually go for as we have the next elections coming up, 2021 or 2022. So as a party, we can identify the ones that would be, you know, best to go for, and identify candidates that we could, you know, those of us that could run and.
Okay.
Go from there.
Okay, so we're talking about it as far as dealing with the fratricide, you know, so-called black on black violence, and we all know that's a misnomer. That's, you know, people talk about black on black violence. You look at World War I and World War II; those are some of the greatest expressions of white on white violence. Period. But yeah, so the fratricide, the internal stuff that happens within the Black community and between elements within the Black community. So you're talking about what, programs, projects, initiatives to try to deal with that? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Okay, well, yeah, well, we definitely need to talk about that because we, you know, some of us, we have a history of doing that type of work, right? And so we could bring to the table our histories and whatever insight that we have, and, you know, look for other resources as well, and, you know, collaborate with other folks, and see if we can come up with some type of program or some type of project that can help us to, you know, stem the tide of some of the shootings and the killings and the murders. Yeah, absolutely. You know, we won't be able to completely deal with that, I mean, in a comprehensive way, until we have a revolution. And I know people don't want to hear that, but that's the truth, right? Unless we profoundly and fundamentally change the relationships between our people and the people who control everything, then we're gonna always be on the other end, and out of anger and frustration and hopelessness and a whole bunch of other stuff. We're gonna have a lot of predatory behavior within our communities, right? And that won't change, man, unless we have revolution. And that's not something that I'm just saying, that's something that history clearly spells out, right? That that whole, you know, stuff that we be going through, and man, that stuff is based on years and years and years and generations of like miseducation, misdirection, deprivation, you know, racist structures. I mean, it's a mess. And we're not going to be able to substantially deal with it until we become a free people. And that's the bottom line. So when we understand that reality, we can approach the work correctly and not get caught up in the thinking that, you know, it's going to be some miracle. We can have a couple of gang truces or make some peace between different crews out here, and that's going to be the turning point. No, it ain't. That's just a very, very micro, small step, right? As you make peace with them, you're going to have to find more efficient and effective ways to make war against the system that created them. So as long as we keep that in mind, I think we'll be okay. Electoral campaigns, you're absolutely right. 2021, 2022, you know, we need to do some assessments in different places where we are, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere, as to what offices we may want to fight for and campaign for, so we can acquire some power for our community. So yes, I agree. Any other comments?
Yeah,
brainstorming stuff. Yeah.
Khalid, I agree with everything you said about the revolution. I definitely believe that's what needs to happen. Me, myself, and over Lafayette, and of course Kandeke, you know, we're out here in Cleveland. It's a shooting almost every other day. A young lady just died last night. She was 22. 22 years old. She got shot in her neck. The most I can say is, you know, I'm from Cleveland, and when we came up, and we did our things or whatever, you know, there was actually codes out in the streets where, you know, no women and children were to be hit. But now they're all over the place with it. So it's getting bad. We have connected with one councilman. His name is Bashir Jones. He's a very powerful brother. So he has reached out to us. And I believe in 2021 that we are going to start networking with more politicians, more councilmen, introducing ourselves, you know, introducing the platform, letting them know, you know, what's going on and making them aware. I feel like that's something that needs to be done. You know, we don't get out there and actually show these people, you know, what we're about and the change that we are looking for, and integrating these things into the city. These people are not going to listen to it. I'm willing to, you know, get on the phone if I have to, you know, keep calling and calling and calling and calling. That's what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? So we are trying to get ourselves on a better platform as far as representing the party with the political side as well. You know, understanding and meeting different people. We've had meetings with the mayor in our local town. He knows exactly who we are. I haven't hid anything from him. You know, I don't hide it. I tell him what we represent and what we are. He's taking a look at the website and everything. So I'm trying to keep a good relationship with these people, because we need these people to understand why we are here and accomplish, our goals. And I'm starting to learn that in this political thing, we can't do it by ourselves. We have to be able to network.
You're absolutely correct. Well, let me give you a little warning, a heads up about even some of the so-called progressive politicians that you're going to be coming across. It's one thing when you're trying to work with them about something that they feel passionate about. It's another thing when you enter the political, arena and you're going to be competing against them or competing against members of their party for office. Different ballgame. And so I just want to forewarn you. And, one of the things that you definitely we need to do is you have to establish your organizing committee and the chapter of your party. You have to do that. That should be a priority, even more so than trying to network with other people, with other public officials and politicians. Because if you don't have your own base from which to flow and from which to operate, believe me, they will do everything they can to either co-opt you or to marginalize you. I mean, that's just what they do. And you shouldn't expect anything different. And if you come across a politician who's exceptional, then don't forget that person, he or she, is exceptional. Most of them are not like that. Most of them are not like that. So I just need to forewarn you, and this is based on experience, right? We are their competitors, and we are competing with them and against them for the hearts and minds of the people, especially Black folk. And a lot of the Black politicians all across this country, they have stayed in office or gotten into office because of Black people. And they have failed to deliver to the Black community. And many of them, especially those who've been in office for a while, have gotten real comfortable with that. So when you and I come along, they see us as a threat, right? When you start talking about, well, you're going to run for office, oh, well, who are you running against? You're running against them, or you're running against one of the people in their party. And their party, most of the time, is the Democratic Party. So I just need to warn you, be mindful. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget that. You will find some exceptions to the rule, but those people are the exceptions to the rule, where you'll find brothers and sisters from the Democratic Party who they'll work with you. It's not an issue, right? Because they're really about trying to help and trying to change the conditions of the people. But the vast majority, brother, are not built like that. They'll work with you if it serves their interests politically. And if it's going to interfere with them staying in office or interfere with somebody in their party staying in office, they're going to push back against you. And they may do it behind your back, but they're going to push back.
Right, look, I'm fully aware of that because I remember when you told us before. So, I really don't trust any politicians, to be honest with you. But I just like to kind of take notes and jot down things. But I'm no fool, though. I definitely don't, trust them. And I'm fully aware that, I have done my lessons on how this politician game works. So I've just been, like I said, I just kind of take it for what it is and kind of just maneuver around. And as far as, we're working on building our platform. We really are, I got a few candidates, that we are going to be making some moves for 2021.
Sounds good. So what I like to do is I'm going to be talking with you. We're going to be talking about this in more detail and really, just helping you to build your organizing committee and build the chapter in Ohio. I think that should be one of the most important things to do. Because if you don't have your own thing established, I'm letting you know up front, they're going to be coming. And they're going to be, coming any way they can. Sometimes with smiles and sometimes with grits, but they're going to be coming, right? You get your own thing established, they still will come, but at least you'll have a basis and a foundation from which to fight.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, y'all, any other comments as we close out? Brainstorming, closing comments. I like what I've heard so far, organizing stuff to fight against the fratricide, organizing, well, first of all, doing the research, doing some logistical stuff and getting ready for like electoral campaigns. All this is great. Any other thing? Oh, I see somebody raise their hand. Okay, Sister Kathy. Sister Kathy raised her hand. Brian, can you make sure she speaks, or if you can't do that, do I need to do that?
Let me see if I can.
Okay, if you can't, let me see if I can. Okay, hold up, Kathy. Let me see if I can do this. I'm gonna promote you to a panelist. All right, Kathy, you should be able to.
Yes, thank you.
There you
Hi,
go.
Khalid, that was very helpful and knowledgeable. And like I said, sometimes we all need a refresher course, and to keep us in the loop, because like, you know, some of the things that you went over, like we've heard and we've been taught, but it's good to hear them again to reinforce things, because except for data, nothing's changed, and it's all good info. I just grateful to you, so thank you so much. And I just wanted to piggyback on what Brian has said, and now is the time. One of the biggest things in my mind is I just sometimes don't get how year after year after year we do what we do, and we go out and we push and we struggle and pull. Now is the time. We can't wait until 2023 in January and say, well, if we could have a candidate that could run. Now is the time for that person to be either groomed or begin to step forward. And so then all for 3-4 years, we just, you know, all get behind them. I think that's our biggest thing. We need our own candidates, like you said, but we can't wait until the year before the election and then come up once again and say we don't have anybody.
Right.
I think that was what Brian was trying to do, like say now is the time. I wish we could run you, man. I really do. Which we can.
Are you talking about running Brian?
No, you.
Man, the only thing I'm running for right now is to catch the bus. That's it.
I'm saying. As long as you're 35 years of age and a U.S. citizen, you are allowed to run.
Well, yeah, that's true.
When it all boils down to it. Heck, they put people in federal judgeships that never even had a case. It was never even in court.
Right.
They asked them, they asked them in a hearing, have you ever been a trial lawyer? Have you ever represented anybody? No. Have you ever defended anybody? No. Have you ever been in court? No. They're just a lawyer. They just happened to pass the bar and they made them judges. So that's what we're faced with. All those people that Mitch McConnell supposedly held back from Barack Obama from appointing, that's how there were so many vacancies by the time Donald Trump got there. So those people are there. Those are there. They are there.
Yeah, that's a
good
point.
I just wanted to say that now's the time.
Now's the time. All right, Kathy, you're right. Now's the time. We got to start to make those plans, and make those plans not just for the big time national elections, but we got to make those plans for the local elections. Yeah, for the local elections. So, all right, well, let's talk about that some more in detail. Any other comments? Any other chat stuff, Brian?
No.
Okay. All right, y'all. Well, let me take a look here. I guess we're going to go ahead and end. Okay. Let me see. Let me look at this chat thing here and see if there's something I need to respond to before we close out. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, thank you very much, Brother O, for the Black Pass thing about the African Blood Brotherhood. You're absolutely right. What's the brother? Cyril Briggs, I think was his name. He was one of the main organizers. And they were some tough brothers, man. They was tough. When they had the Red Summer, you know, they were accused of actually organizing some of the black militias and fighters to fight back against the racist white mobs. They was like the Black Panther Party of their day. Okay, y'all. Well, thank you again. I appreciate your participation. As always, appreciate it. We have our regular scheduled organizing meeting stuff tomorrow. We're going to go over a few things. But I think we covered a lot of good material today, so tomorrow should be a breeze. So I want to thank you all again. All power to the people and free the land.
All power to the people.
Real quick, Brother Khalid, I put in the chat the link to our YouTube channel.
Oh, great. Okay, good, good. I hope people will see that as well. And yeah, because we got some videos on that channel, man. If you just want to listen and hear, hey, we got some stuff that it goes on too long for me. I'm trying to find somebody who could edit some of this stuff. Yeah. It'll put you to sleep, I'm sure. It put me to sleep, and I was saying it. All right, y'all. Proud of people, free the land. Talk with you next time.
Proud of people, free the land.